I think that's trademarked at this point. Oh, as soon as I did that, then Celine's video started going all pixelated. You're good, though.
Yeah, she looks
yep.
good to me.
Okay. It's recording locally.
Yeah. Okay. I think the video records locally, too, does it not? I think it does.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Why don't we do this, then? We're going to do a little countdown, Selene, which you're probably used to, right?
Yep.
Helps me get things together. All right, this is the Selene Yeager interview for the Marginal Gains podcast. And the countdown in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You have your Top Gun turned off there, Mrs. Hottie? Yeah, okay. She likes to watch movies while she works, but so this is a terrible disruption for her. Okay.
We're like a movie. We're as good as a movie.
Right. Okay.
Depending on the movie.
You want me to start off here, Eldon, Fatty?
Go for it.
Okay. Again, Marginal Gainers, we welcome to the show Selene Yeager. Most of you are, if not all of you, are very familiar with her work as a journalist, a reporter, as someone you may have read on the pages of Bicycling Magazine. She is the person who's advised us about all manner of things, fitness and health and how to ride your bike properly and tech reviews, bike. So it surprised me, Selene, when I looked on my Instagram feed the other day, and I follow you on Instagram, and there your head was popping out of a swimming pool, obviously just finishing up a lap or something. I said, what the hell's this? Selene is swimming? You swim as well, Selene?
This is really funny. So it's been 12 years since I've been in the pool. So I did, for those who may or may not remember, I did this little thing called Ironman in 2008. And I won my age group in Louisville and went to Kona 6 weeks later, and that was the end. That was the end of the pool for me. And I picked up mountain bike stage racing. I got picked up by a team and did that semi-professionally for a bunch of years. But very recently, I've been thinking, I kind of miss the three-sport thing. I feel really good when I'm swimming and running, but I just haven't been motivated to do so. And I came across a new half Ironman 70.3 distance in Happy Valley, Pennsylvania came to my attention. And the finish line is on the 50-yard line of Beaver Stadium. And, yeah, it's a point-to-point. It has, all the hallmarks of things I love. I would never do another Ironman. I just don't like running enough, but a half is very intriguing. And I, literally signed up as soon as I saw it. And I was like, well, got to get back in the pool. So I hired a coach, Marnie Sumbal, who is amazing. And she has, I've never had, that picture you saw, probably I was with a swim snorkel, right? And you didn't see all the other toys. I've got paddles, I've got buoys, I've got fins, I've got straps around my ankle, all these toys to sort of help me get my feel for the water again. Yeah. And that week, I swam almost 10,000 meters over 3 days, which is a lot of swimming. But it's been really fun. It's been really fun to play around in the pool. And using all those toys really gives you the feel for the water. And your audience would appreciate there's a wind tunnel element to it where you can really feel the slipstream. And you can feel when you can hold the water and use it without losing it, without losing that feel. It's pretty cool. You can really geek out in swimming in ways.
Oh, hydrodynamics is a thing. My uncle was in hydroplane racing.
Oh, wow.
And so that's all about your ability to move a boat. Well, the boats actually rise out of the water at times, but your ability to move quickly across or through the water. So hydrodynamics is a whole
really cool
deep dive in itself. And getting the human body to move through water is very... I'll never forget... I had to write some articles about swimming, and I struggled like you would struggle in the water. It was so foreign to me. But I heard you explain recently about swimming and the beauty of it, and you made a comparison to golf. When your golf swing is in sync and you're doing it correctly and you're hitting the golf ball correctly, swimming can be the same thing. It can be almost the same have the same effect on you when you're
definitely
probably
can.
stroking through the water, right? Yeah.
And I never liked golf enough to get to that point of trying mastery. But what would keep you coming back to golf is that when you can hear it, it's that thwack. You can hear when the club hits the ball just right and it flies in that beautiful arc and lands where it's supposed to instead of hitting a house to the right or going off into the, all the things that happen when you don't hit it correctly. Swimming is a whole lot like that. It's just so technique driven. And when you come out of the water with good form, you're not exhausted. You haven't just saved yourself from drowning, right? Yeah. You're just not, it's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
So walk us through some of the tools, I guess, that you are getting marginal gains from. And I want to kind of put in a little plug. Former promoter of the show, Form Goggles. I'm curious if you were using anything like that so that you're actually getting a heads-up display while you're swimming as well.
No, I am not.
All right.
So I don't have that. That's very interesting, though. And actually, now that you say that, they are interested in we're going to talk about the podcast that I'm involved with in a bit, like Hit Play Not Pause, right? But Feisty Media does Iron Woman Triathlon. They do a lot in the triathlete space. So I'm supposed to be getting a pair of those goggles to try. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out. I have not tried them yet. I just have the old school analog goggles right now.
So what are you using?
But I am using, to get the feel for the water, I have a swim snorkel, so you can just keep your head down, and that helps you really dial in your form without the turning of your head, right? Mm-hmm. I use that periodically. I've got paddles on my hands, which also sort of help with the grab in the pool, because if you don't do it right, the things come off your hand or they start catching in the water, so it really helps with that part. Got a buoy that you can put between your knees, which also helps with sort of the rotation, helps you float and know how you're supposed to feel in the water. An ankle strap, which also keeps your feet about the right distance apart. And I think that might be it for the toys in the water. Oh, and also a kickboard, which you can, she had me do this crazy drill yesterday. I'm like, this is going to look ridiculous. If you've seen a kickboard, it's pretty big, it's about, I don't know, a foot or more. And she had me put it between my legs. And so I looked sort of like an inverted shark, it was like a shark fin sort of hanging up back there. And then I would have to tap it on each. So I had a snorkel and that thing, and I was supposed to tap the board. So my hip rotation and drive was working, but all of that stuff. And I think I liken it a lot to the things that you do on your bike, right? That try to, whether it's the one-legged drills or the pulling up, it's the same idea. You're trying to really get in these movement patterns that then will become automatic, and your body position will become automatic. And it's all that stuff. And it really 100% pays off. I think, even though I've spent my fair time in wind tunnels and doing that stuff on the bike, you feel it way more in the water because of the 800 times resistance of the water to the air. You really feel it more in the water.
So what are the gains you've noticed? I mean, how much of it?
It's amazing. You just you feel so much more effortless because you don't have that resistance, right? As soon as I take the toys away and my form is correct and everything, and I've got the water and I'm grabbing it and pulling it and doing all the things, you feel like you're just gliding through the water, and it takes seconds off of 100, 100 meters. It's remarkable.
Yeah, that's meaningful for sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's get out of the water now.
Okay,
and,
out of the water. Time to transition to the bike.
Let's make transition to the bike. Selene, we always ask our guests on this show this first question. Actually, it's our second now because we discussed swimming. But how did the bike come into your life?
Yeah, I get asked this all the time, and I, it's always been there, and I'm not really sure why. It's not like my parents were into it. My dad rode a motorcycle, and I always enjoyed getting on the back of that when I was old enough. My grandfather actually had gotten really into bikes a bit later, so maybe there's some little bike gene that I have. But my first memories are honestly dreaming of being on a tricycle, of riding around on a tricycle. And when I was in high school, I remember taking my bike, and it was like a speech and composition class, and I rode down the hall and into my class and did this whole speech on bikes. I didn't even know anything, but I'm just this is how you shift, and this is why riding a bike is awesome. Where did that come from? I have no idea. But it really wasn't until I was well into adulthood and I got my job at Rodale that I knew that people competed at them or that I had any innate talent for doing this thing.
So over the years, then, what would you say is your best moment on the bike, in or out of competition?
It's literally impossible to give you that, just because, I've had this like very fortunate existence where I have been able to race a bike in Israel and in Cuba and in Brazil and in South Africa. To pin anything down would be so hard. I mean, I would say riding through Havana and Cuba was amazing. I feel very privileged to have been able to have there was a local guy that just came up to the group of us who were racing the next day and he's like, "Hey, you want a real tour?" And we were like, "Yes." And we were just like racing through the city streets, and that was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. I think your start is pretty amazing too. I mean, into triathlon racing. In fact, I understand you was almost a whim, like you were reading this article and you said, "Oh, that looks kind of interesting, a triathlon," and you knew that you loved the three sports, so you signed up, and the next thing you know, you're off to Louisville for a race that you won, and that put you into Kona, which is bam, bam. I mean, that's a pretty quick acclimation into the sport of triathlon. But tell us about this power bar into the derailleur incident during one of these triathlons, and maybe there's a lesson here for all of us.
I don't know, except don't do that. Don't do that. I don't know if people still do that. But like that was, so Louisville was at the end of August. It was August 30th, I believe, that year, which is hot in Louisville at the end of August. And those were still the days when people would like take their power bars and smush them. I don't know if people still do this. Don't do this if you still
do it. They do it all the time.
And smash them onto the top tube so it's easy to access. So I'm like, well, of course. So the interesting thing with Ironman is it's a transition. It's sort of a clean transition. So you have to set it up and then you leave your bike there. You leave it overnight. Yeah. You don't have access, which is, to those of us who have OCD, that's horrifying.
Hard to sleep that night. Oh, yeah.
Right? You like all your stuff. I mean, all you can think of is I'm going to get there and I'm not going to have something, or the tires are going to be flat, or, all the things that you just...
Someone's going to have knocked my bike over.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nightmare. But it is kind of a nightmare because I got there and it had been so hot that my power bars melted. And I didn't know what had happened, but one of them had, like, a drop of it had gone into the derailleur. And like while I was riding, I was like, "What is that?" I was like, "Oh my God, that's not good." So I like pulled it out. I was just warming up and I pulled it out. And I guess in doing that, this was before the race had started. I guess in doing that, I had somehow loosened the screw or something. I don't even have language to say what I must have done. And it is only by divine intervention that I fixed it. But so anyway, I got out of the water. I had a great swim time. I got on the bike. The course is quite hilly because it's Louisville, so it's sort of like here where it's just not flat, but it's a lot of undulating. And there was only one meaningful rise that you would even need to get into the small ring, on the course. And I had gotten in the small ring, and I was done. I was having a great day. I went to put it back into the big ring, and nothing. And I was like, nothing. It's like, what is happening? And I looked down and it wasn't shifting. I was just like, I don't know what's happening. And there was still some power bar in there. I was like, oh no. And the cable had come out. The derailleur cable had like come out. And to this day, guys, I can't tell you how I fixed it. Like literally it was like somebody stopped, one of the neutral support people stopped. And they said, "Do you need help?" And I was like, "Yes." And it could have been, he said it could be 15 minutes. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, that's not, in my head, I'm like, I've trained for a year and I think I could go to Kona. So I'm like, I literally just said, I'm like, God, just get me in the big ring. And I took out a tool and I pulled the cable and I put it and I'm like, I'm just not going to shift. I'm just going to put it like right there. And I barely shifted the rest of the race. But I won my age group. It worked. And that was that. So don't do that. That is not a marginal gain. That marginal gain that I thought I was getting from putting not unwrapping my bars or not putting them in my pocket ended up costing me minutes, and that was not a bit more than marginal losses, I would say, on that day.
But the adrenaline that you got from the anger, that is probably what put you in the lead. right?
And my coach was watching my dot, and he was just like, "What is happening?" Because, like, of course, the dot it just stops, you know. But
I mean, no matter how much you prepare, all of those marginal gains, they can go out the window. The reason I was talking about your bike being knocked over is because in the one Ironman I did, someone did in fact knock my bike over out of the stand, and it put my Di2 into reset mode.
Oh no!
Without me even knowing. And so it took a while before I was able to get my shifting working again. So I have been in the same place have for different reasons. But yeah, it's all of the planning in the world, which is what the show is about, can be erased in a flash. Keeping your head is possibly the most important marginal gain there could ever be.
100%. And I'll tell you something. My coach at the time, Craig Scheckler, said to me, he said, if something can go wrong, it's going to go wrong in your race. Like, he said that before I went. Yeah. And he said, when something goes wrong, look at it as a rest break that will pay off later in the day. And that stuck in my mind. I'm like, okay, I don't want this right now, but I am just going to stay calm. I'm going to fix my bike, and this is just a little rest break, so I'm going to have more energy later. And because what else are you going to do? Like, if you freak out, you're just burning energy, right? Mm-hmm. So I was just like, this is just an unplanned rest break, and I would just use it as such.
That is actually fantastic advice for any marginal gainer, thinking about not whether something will go wrong, but how you're going to behave and how you're going to, I guess, process and work with something when it will go wrong. Because what racer has not dealt with something that feels like a race-ending mechanical or that is unanticipatable during a race, right? Yeah.
I do have I have, while we're talking about these unexpected things, I have a question, and maybe you have, like, the other moment on my bike that I had like this, I was in Michaud State Forest, which is on my mountain bike. We were training for Cape Epic, my partner and I, which is in the end of March, early April in South Africa, but when the end of March in Pennsylvania is very different from the end of March in South Africa, and we were in, like, about 4 inches of fresh snow. It was very rideable for most of the day, but then towards the end of the day, it started, like, slushing on us, you know, so it was sort of in that in-between, you know, after a 4-hour ride, and we were getting quite cold at this point because the weather was moving in. And I looked back, and we had about 7 miles to go, and we're trying to hurry because we're getting hypothermic, and I can't shift, and I can barely move, and my chain won't stay on, and everything is frozen. My drivetrain is completely, all of it. And our friend Buck, who was with us, said, well, you got to pee on that. It was just like, what are you talking about? He's like, the only way we're getting out of here. And I, like, literally, I was just like a giraffe to the water hole, like, trying to sort of, like, position myself over the bike to pee, because you can't aim. I don't have a funnel and a hose. I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I'm like, I'm going to pee all over my bike. I will say it worked. Like, it melted and we got out of there. But is there something I could have done? I've looked back, like, besides that? You're all both speechless. I love it.
No, I'm thinking of it. It's not a question that I was prepared for. Of course, the fact that you had something on your chain that was freezing meant that you did not have a chain that was sufficiently lubed, right? Because the oil, because good lube would not have frozen.
Huh.
Right. So,
I'm very bad about that.
Did you, I'm curious, you know, what did you start the day with on the chain would be a question. I probably, that would be one.
I'm going to say nothing.
Okay.
I am bad about that. I will say I am bad about being consistent with the lubes I use, and I'm maybe using the right ones and keeping all of that clean. So,
we have a show for you?
Might have been my own doing.
Hi, we're the Marginal Gain Show. We talk endlessly about chain lubricants.
I bet you do. I'll have to check those out because it makes I'm sure that definitely makes a huge difference.
That said, I have no idea what I would think that pee would freeze on your chain just as quickly as whatever was on the chain itself.
Your body, it's pretty warm. It melted. I mean, the slush had just frozen. Like, my jockey wheels and stuff were just, everything was just, the slush was kicking up from the ground and freezing into the hole. It was like a block of ice. It was unbelievable.
Astonishing. I mean, it was a solution that worked. So
it did. We got out, and then
we work with what you got.
Went into the little. Thank God the restrooms were open, and we just hit every single hand dryer and just sat under them and just warmed ourselves back up before we got home.
I hope post race that you tipped your mechanic well.
Yeah, those were the days. Anyway, but.
So your success in triathlons led to a mountain bike contract, becoming a pro mountain biker, right? And all this time you're also writing for Rodale for Bicycling Magazine or some of their outlets, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's how I make. That's why I eat. The money I made racing never would have really paid for the bills. But
yeah, and of course you end up riding with the likes of Rebecca Rush and some of the greats of mountain biking. A lot of endurance events, I gather, stage race mountain biking racing. So you got to see the world and write at the same time, which is the dream of Fatty and mine and just about everyone who's probably involved in cycling. Of course, you're sitting here with two guys, both of whom go by nicknames, and you have one too. Fatty, Hottie, which I didn't choose, it was given to me, and you are the fit chick. Tell us how this nickname came to you, and do you still? I call you Selene, but do you still?
Most people call me Selene. Nobody actually calls me fit chick. I mean, that's not. I mean, when I sometimes when I'm out in the world, somebody will be like, "Are you the fit chick?" And I'll be like, "Oh, sometimes." But it was 1999, and bicycling was rebooting for the. I don't know. It was Bill Strickland had just gotten to the helm for the first time. And he was fashioning the magazine after a lot of the they called it chunk journalism at the time. Everything was all chunked up because the internet had just become a thing. And he wanted to make it a series of columns, and he wanted to put my content in a monthly column called Ask. Like, there was a lot of Ask the Mechanic. So Ask the Iron Cowboy, Ask the blah, blah, blah. And so they were just, I had nothing to do with it, honestly. They were just like, what should we call the fitness person? And they were just like, Ask the Fitness Chick. And I was like, whatever, that's fine. And then it just got shortened to Fit Chick, and then the column was Ask the Fit Chick, and then it just became Fit Chick, and it just sort of hung. Like, I don't even really think about it anymore, but yeah, it is still a thing.
Yeah. I mean, Hottie is not a name I would have picked for myself.
It's fine.
And would you pick Fit Chick, and are you still cool with that? Like, how does that settle with you?
I don't honestly think about it that much.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes I look at it like I would change it, except when it's not that when you change it on Instagram, everything that is like you've been tagged in sort of disappears. So it's like, it's really the only thing that keeps me from changing my handle on Instagram is that legacy.
Got it. Okay.
I will say, though, Hottie, I mean, Michael Houghton, the nickname Hottie, your nickname out of the three of us is the only one that actually is a nickname. So.
I would hate, though, if people thought I was calling myself a Hottie.
You are remarkably good looking.
See, that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Right.
And you're right. That's why the name is what it is. Like, it came from a teammate in road racing, and that's where a lot of these nicknames can crop up. Like, teammates will call each other names because you don't want to yell out Michael Houghton during the middle of a crit when you're trying to get my attention, right? You just want to yell out Hottie, move over, move up, what have you. And that's where it did come from. We also had Backpack Joe, and we had G Money, and we had these other characters on our team too, and I just happened to get Hottie. I resisted it for a while, but eventually I took it. So that's where my name came from. Now, Selene, of course, we have seen your byline in a number of places, Bicycling Magazine. I guess probably the most notable, but you've written for all kinds of fitness outlets over the years, and books. In our household alone, we have Roar, we have Next Level, we have Rush to Glory. I don't think I have Climb here, but how many books are you up to now? What's in the Selene library?
Yeah, I tried, I was trying to do a count before we came on because I knew you were going to ask that. I think I've contributed because the thing is I also co-author a lot of books and contribute to a lot of books. So if you count all of those things, it's probably, it's definitely 3 dozen. But if you're just looking at about me, maybe 6 to 10 that are mostly mine and a couple others that are bylined. I've written a lot for bicycling in and of itself. Yeah. And then I have the 2 that I wrote with Dr. Stacy Sims, which are the Roar and the Next Level. So, it's just part and parcel to how I make a living.
Mm-hmm. I saw Rush to Glory is now an audiobook, by the way.
And she read it, which I love.
Yeah, so do I, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we tried to get Hadi to read it, and it just didn't come off quite the same.
Right.
But you're incredibly prolific, obviously, Selene, and you have been for decades now. I think that there is something special there, and you've been a long-form creator for a couple of decades, and we're moving into kind of more of a social media universe where content seems to be a little brief. How is that different for you?
Yeah, it's funny because I just actually did a session for a conference on how to write content that people will actually read, right? And somebody actually asked, well, do you still, because of podcasting is such a big part of what I do, they're like, well, do you consider yourself still a writer? And I was like, yeah. What's interesting is that podcasting is almost long-form writing in a way, because you're telling a story or you're covering a topic in an hour. That's a lot. One of the things that I actually really loved about it when I started doing it, I was like, this is amazing, because I would interview people for features and could spend easily a half hour on the phone with them and use 2 sentences. And that always bothered me. It always bothered me. But you have especially when it was the print world, the space is always limited, and things always got cut. So it's amazing to me, and I think that's why people gravitate towards podcasts, is because there is a hunger for that, all that stuff that is left out, you get, and you get people's thought processes in real time, and you get a deeper dive into things. So I think that has been a real joy and a real revelation for myself and the content that I like to create. Because it's I'm 100 podcasts or so in, and that's well over a book, right? It's just a lot of content.
Sure, absolutely. Your road to pro racing and pro riding, though, was not without challenges. Obviously, I think none of us have a direct path to where we are today, and yours was certainly rough at times. Body shaming became a big deal in your life. Bulimia were 2 things you had to overcome. How did the fit chick was just unfit, I guess, at some point in her life, extremely, right? So how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I wouldn't. So the body image, I don't know that I've ever. In college, I wasn't fit, but I was extremely thin because I had an eating disorder at that time. The whole body image stuff came much, much younger. When I was young, 8, my pediatrician had my mom put me on a diet, and that doesn't go away. Even though that was probably just a normal growth thing and I was just big as a kid, that doesn't leave you. I was always sort of the biggest kid in class and all of that stuff. And once I got to college, I just felt really everybody was talking about the freshman 15, and in my mind, that was the worst thing that could possibly happen to you, because I had always been trying to control this thing called weight, because I thought that that's what you were supposed to do. And there's a lot of images that especially women get about what you're supposed to look like. And so I just it was very much a play to try to get control of something. And the way you can get control of something is I'm just not going to eat, right? That. That is just how I dealt with it. And I rationalized that I was an honor student and I remained an honor student. So I was okay, even though I was very much not okay. And I had not, I played sports in high school and I was incredibly active. I was a varsity field hockey player, and I had always ridden my bike. And when I got to college, I kind of stopped all that. Like I did aerobics here and there, but I just, everything, I kind of got really lost, you know, once I got to college. And it's funny that, you know, my parents got very, very worried about me. I mean, I got down to about 100 pounds, which is really, really, really light for me. And my hair was falling out. It was bad. It was not, I look back, I'm like, wow, that was really bad. I feel really bad for my parents now. But, you know, I got out of school and I got back on a bike, and it sounds so cliche to say it, but getting back on the bike helped me sort of just find myself back to myself. You know, I once I got on, I was at home. I got on my old bike and I was going to ride some of the stuff that I used to ride when I was in high school, and I could barely make it up the hills anymore because I had just gotten like out of shape. I had been smoking cigarettes at like this job I was waiting tables at, and I was just like kind of a mess. And I'm like, this is not okay. And I just I just started riding again, not thinking like I'm going to change my life by riding my bike again, but it just sort of worked. You know, I got back on the bike. I liked how that felt. It helped me just fall away from some of those other behaviors, and my brain just got back into a better place. So, you know, that was the evolution of that.
Yeah.
But those body image things never leave you. You know, they never leave you.
Yeah. So did movement help propel you out of that then? The movement 100%. On the bike?
Like whatever. There's nothing like riding a bike. I don't have to tell anybody in this audience that, right? There's something that is just so meditative and so good for your brain. And I could probably do a whole show on that evolution, but it just got me connected to who I was again, when I think I had really lost who I was and just didn't even know who I was for a while, and was just trying. I definitely have control things where I like to control a lot in my life, and when I was felt so out of control and lost. I mean, in college that way was just like trying to control it through how I was eating or not eating. But when you get back on a bike, like, you need to eat, and you need to sort of figure out that piece of it. You need to figure out like how you're going to nourish yourself, and it feels good, and your head feels good, and you just become in a better place. I mean, that's a lot of people. I probably have a bit of an addictive personality too, and it's just like you hear about the people who have struggled with drugs or whatever they do. They find ultras, you know, and I don't think that's a far cry from me. I just have this. Obviously, I have this piece of my brain that likes to go long and likes to like be in that space, and I feel very grateful that I found that.
Yeah, I think that there is a real common personality aspect to the folks who listen to this show. You know, that we are a type A kind of people who find a comfort in having a very structured, very direct line type of athleticism, and that it is something that we can all control. And I think that you're sort of speaking to that. It is a way that we can get rid of a lot of the chaos in the world, because this is one thing where we really know what we're doing and how, you know, if we do this, then we will have these kinds of results. I think that there is, I'm going to go ahead and go, it's sort of elephant in the room kind of thing. This is a show that is normally hosted by three guys that is listened to, let's face it, mostly guys. And it's great to have you on the show who understands and lives a lot of the same experiences that we live. But of course, your audience, at least for your current podcast, and I want to dig into that a little bit, but you were talking more to women, at least in parts of your career. What are the things that we, the hosts and our audience, should know that we don't know, so that we can talk with the women riders and people in our lives and explain either what we love about this, or what we want, or what we should understand about them?
That's a really big question. So are we still talking about bikes? like where?
It is. I do want to constrain it at least to a degree to that we love writing. We are very type A about writing, and we are somehow doing things that somehow seems to exclude the women writers and racers in our lives. What are we doing wrong?
So are you referring to the fact that not a whole lot of women listen to the show?
Well, to the show, or probably if you look at a typical group ride, it is mostly men.
This is so interesting to me because I mean, like bicycling, sort of bantered back and forth about this. Race promoters are always like, how do we get more women? Mm-hmm. The industry. Women are here. I mean, women are riding, but women are riding bikes. Let's be clear. There's a lot of women on bikes. There's a lot of women. Catherine Taylor, who does Girls Gone Gravel, which is underneath the umbrella of Feisty Media. We had a gravel festival for women in Bentonville last year. We're having another one. We capped it at 300. They all show up. Women came from all over the country to come to this thing. All over the country. The group rides I'm on these days sometimes they're mostly women, even on the mountain bikes. Like, women are on bikes. I think what happens, though, is that we show up in a different way than men do. And because it's been such a male-dominated industry for so long, like men, and it's been defined by how men show up on bikes, that we're not seen a lot of times. Women are not seen in the same ways because we're not showing up in those same places where there's a lot of men. And, I do think that, on one hand, it is important to hold spaces for women at races that more people are starting to do because women still bear the brunt of housework and childcare and all those things, even when there's an able-bodied partner in the house. Otherwise, they still do, and they don't sign up for races by and large quite as quickly as a man would. There's all kinds of social, cultural dynamics there, and they might be less willing to spend the same kind of money on bike stuff for themselves. Like, that stuff is still very true. But at the same time, women will, spend some money to go fly across the country and be with other women at a festival of bikes where there's not competition and there's not all these other things, where it's just this experiential thing. In my experience, and I'm only speaking from my experience, women really enjoy the experience of riding bikes. They love the community of riding bikes. They like all those things about riding bikes, but they don't nickel and dime the tech as much in their minds. They're just not as, they just don't do that as much. I see a lot of women bike packing, and going on trips together. They're there. There's a big part of me that wishes that we could all celebrate the way that so many women are showing up on bikes. And I don't know if they are ever going to gravitate towards a Marginal Gains podcast. I don't know that. I don't, and that's, in my mind, that's okay. And I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate wanting to speak more to women and wanting to bring more women into the fold. I think that's great. We just have a relationship with things that are just a little bit different. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, as long as we're not willfully excluded and that there is room at the table. But we've also just been building our own table. And I think that's okay too. Yeah.
The greatest bike pack racer in this country, by far, is a woman. That's Leo Wilcox. She is the greatest. And
she doesn't wear chamois, and she drinks half and half, right? She's not necessarily the most marginal game person. Anyway.
Yeah. Yes, she is absolutely terrific. And you're right. I think we all just kind of find our own communities. And sometimes that's divided up by gender, and sometimes it's not. But as long as we're all kind of remembering, hey, just because we have our own little group here doesn't mean it has to stay that way. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be open to bringing others in. We should always leave those doors open.
Yeah, I think that is important.
So we're being inclusive, not exclusive, and that's what we want to see.
I 100% agree with that. I think where I sit back and look at it is that sometimes I feel like women are being judged as less than because they're not participating in race, the highest level of races, like lining up for Unbound 200. And I'm like, but what if we would have never wanted to do that to begin with? You know what I mean? Like we're still being judged through this male filter of what it looks like to be a cyclist or whatever. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, is that the goal? That's a bit of a provocative thought, but it's one I've had a lot over the 30 years of my career.
Right. Gotcha. Since you brought up technology, one of your jobs at Bicycling Magazine and other outlets has been to review tech. They put you on bikes and say, Selene, write this up. Tell us what you think. You've done a great job over the years, by the way. So we want to kind of tap into your knowledge about what you've seen over the years, what you've written about over the years, what you have liked, what you have loved even, and what has disappointed you over the years regarding bikes and bike technology.
This might be the shorter segment of the show. I have written a lot about tech. I am not as tech obsessed as some of the gear editors that have been there. I will say, and I'll come right out of the gate blazing with an unpopular opinion, that I hate electronic shifting. Ooh. And there I said it. And if heads are exploding all over the place, so be it. But I have had more headaches with electronic shifting than I've had in decades of nice, crisp mechanical shifting. Like you talk about, Fatty gave that perfect example of like the Di2. I've had that happen shipping my bike to races where I'm just like, oh, okay, that happened. Or the wires get like something happens and you have to plug your bike in, which makes me insane. I have 5 batteries on one of my bikes. It's just, I know everyone loves it. I am not. I have been disappointed, I guess, in my overall experience with it.
What have you loved? There's got to be a few things out there that have said, oh, now that's...
Disc brakes.
Okay.
Disc brakes. And what I love about disc brakes is it kicked open the door to gravel bikes. And I think that has changed so I feel like the bikes that are being made now are the bikes we should have been selling everybody in the 90s. We were selling people the stiffest, the race bikes that we were selling to the general population. It's almost criminal.
Oh, yeah.
You mean those aluminum stiff crit bikes that we were all on for a while?
Oh my God. That would make you want to and I know people that quit the sport. They're like, this is terrible. I'm like, yes, you're right. Actually, it is. Yeah. I mean, now that we have it just opened the door to being able to put bigger tires and it's just changed everything. It's changed people's relationship with riding.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about disc brakes is you can find, I don't know if it's an equal number of people who say that what you say about electronic shifting, they'll say that about disc brakes too, especially hydraulic disc brakes. The hassle of it, extending a hydraulic line is just a pain in the butt, especially if you have internal routing. So it's not, it's not 100% love. We can certainly say that. And there's still a good number of folks out there who are standing by their rim brakes and saying, well, this is the easiest, my path of least resistance to getting out and having fun, and that is sticking with rim brakes. And I still have rim brake bikes too, so I still kind of like them. But you're right, for screaming downhills when you need to scrub speed, hard to beat the disc brake.
And I still contend that it's disc brakes that have opened the door for adventure, for really making a whole other category of bike, whatever you want to call that bike.
Yeah.
Just because it's the clearance issue that you'll never get that on a rim brake.
Since we're on the topic of media and reviews, let's talk about what's happening in cycling media right now. We've seen.
Can I just say one more thing about?
Sure.
Can I say that please save the shake dry? Because that is actually the one thing that.
The shake dry jacket, you're saying,
yes,
correct? Yes,
I read something very upsetting before we move on to media. I do want to say that is one of the on the apparel end, Gore-Tex shake dry.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree. I haven't heard anything about the shake dry disappearing. If that's true, then yeah, let's get a petition started. If there is, I can't think of another piece of apparel that is more important to me in my riding
100%.
than my Gore-Tex Shake Dry jacket. The thing weighs like 0.0 pounds, collapses into something that will fit in any jersey pocket, and keeps you absolutely dry in any kind of rain. It is a great windbreaker. It's the most remarkable thing I have ever owned. I lost one once, and it became like the single most important thing in my life to replace it. And so I don't know.
I saw a piece in road.cc that was like they're having trouble getting the materials. Like, so they've stopped sort of doing the, like when other companies want to use the technology, they're like, we don't have enough. But I love that stuff. That has been a game changer, and I don't use that word often.
They're expensive, they kind of wear out, and it doesn't matter. The Gore-Tex Shake Dry jacket is just a remarkable, wonderful piece of equipment. No rider who ever rides in the rain should go without having one of those.
Well, I'll guard mine with my life, then. I have one myself.
I think you should.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So let's talk about cycling media then. Right. We've seen the layoffs coming. Cycling Tips just laid off some folks. Velo News has been retracting for a while now. I don't know what's going on at bicycling, although I'll say this. I mean, every time my bicycling magazine arrives here at my house, and yes, I still get hard copy, I check for your name, Selene, to make sure you're still down there.
Still in there.
She's still in there, and I'm very much relieved of that. But what is happening in the cycling media, Selene? Is this just an adjustment period, or are we seeing a downsizing? Like, is this industry really pulling back in a big way?
Well, I mean, traditional cycling media is definitely, it's been since the internet. I mean, it's been disrupted, right? Like, and they've never. I think some places are starting to finally sort of figure out what it looks like in this internet world. But I mean, what happened is that everybody became a creator, right? I mean, once you have YouTube and everyone's got a phone and you don't have any gatekeeping to someone who can have their own channel and tell their own stories and get their own following. And there's so much information that is right there for you that traditional cycling media, traditional any media, honestly, just doesn't have a chance, right? It doesn't, I mean, I don't think that will ever go back to what it was. A lot of them have settled into, though bicycling has settled into a membership model, and that has all the different aspects to it, which, I think bicycling has continued to do it pretty well. And they've also adjusted with the cultural changes of bicycling, and it's less racer focused and it's more about experiential. I mean, I think that you're going to continue to see this kind of shift happen as more people can create their own content, and you're seeing what, like, the people who have been shed from those traditional outlets are forming their own media, right? You know how that plays out. We're all going to see, but that's
the tough bit too for media of all types, especially the print side of media. This happened with the New York Times, the LA Times, and now we're seeing it, of course, with publications. Is that initially when the internet came along, they just put stuff up on it, and they went, well, we'll just put some articles up there, and now they're going, now we got to find a way to monetize that. Before they were just giving it away, and now they're finding themselves having to charge people for that, and it puts them in a bizarre spot where they have to turn to people and say, yeah, that stuff we were giving you for free, now we need money for it, and it's a tough sell.
Fatal error. Like, and that they did that right out of the gate, just gave things away, and they haven't really covered. I mean, the good thing is that by and large, most media now does have some level of a paywall where you have to pay, but it's so difficult because, I think what Outside tried to do was like, okay, like, it's hard because you don't want to, like, nickel and dime yourself to death, like, subscribing to all these different things, even though people did subscribe to a million magazines back in the day, right?
Yeah.
And put it all under one roof, but then you have that problem too. Then you have all these similar titles under one roof. So, yeah, I don't, there's no easy fix here.
Right. Well, We love what you're doing with Feisty Media. Now, that's the group you're with who well, first of all, describe Feisty Media for us. What does it do? And then your podcast, which is called Hit Play Not Pause. What are those two worlds about?
So Feisty Media is out of British Columbia. They're a Canadian-based company, and it is an all-woman media company. And their mission, in one word, is to create an empowering culture for women in sport. So any active women like that, the idea is like, sort of like we were talking about with cycling, like the women are here, the women are doing all these things. How can we support them? How can we create a culture that supports women in sports and elevates them and elevates us all? So, underneath that umbrella, there's like the Iron Woman podcast, there's Girls Gone Gravel, there's my podcast, Hit Play Not Pause. Marley Blonsky is going to be coming out with a podcast underneath that umbrella soon. So there's a lot of different podcasts underneath that umbrella, and they all have the same underlying mission. And mine, Hit Play Not Pause, is specifically for women, generally 40 plus, who are in that hormonal shift in their life that comes with menopause.
Mm-hmm. But is there a particular focus regarding Hit Play Not Pause? Is it women who want to stay active while they're in this part of their life, or do you cover the whole topic in general and try to give anybody as much info as they need?
No. I mean, I'm really my lane is performance-minded women,
Okay.
So and that doesn't, and I have a lot of women who are Peloton riders. I have women who are gym riders. I have women who are Olympic, level athletes. It's sort of all of it, but it is for active performance-minded women, because there's plenty of information out there for the general population, and the vast majority of people don't actually purposely exercise. We know that. But when I was looking for information for myself, like the information I would find would be like, you should exercise, and be like, no kidding. I mean, it was useless. So I wanted to start a resource for people who were sort of like where I was. We're already doing the thing, but the hormonal fluctuations that happen make doing the thing challenging. So you have to sort of work with your changing physiology, and let's talk about that.
Right.
Now, you are many, many episodes into this podcast now, more than 100 episodes. So obviously we're not going to encapsulate that. But what is a good on-ramp for Hottie, for me, for our audience, so that we can...
Oh, I've already picked out shows, Fatty. I've been listening already. Trust me. Weightlifting, right? I love that one. Yeah, so...
Honestly, the first one is like the one I did out of the gate, introducing the show with Dr. Stacey Sims, who I came out with Roar and Next Level, which is for this audience, because it just sort of talks about, it gives a really global overview of like what is happening hormonally and how that's affecting your training and performance. Like that's just a really good place to start. And then all the shows, talk about like smaller parts of that, or are just with women, who are dealing with it at a high level of exercise, whatever it is. But the first one is really the best place to go, just because it lays the groundwork so well.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Stacey Sims is a terrific resource, obviously for women. I've learned tons from her. She's an absolute open book, no pun intended, with her information. Really loves to share and teach people. She's really way back in her days when she was at Osmo. I remember going up to see her in Fairfax and stopping by her shop, and there she was in the shop. And she took my questions, and she was absolutely great. So a terrific person to have on your side, that's for sure. And we'll start with show 1 then. It's checking with Dr. Stacey Sims. Now, like Fatty said, you have over 100 episodes. It comes out, I think, weekly.
Yep.
There was one episode I just listened to that said the face of menopause. Selene Yeager, the face of menopause. So I guess I want to ask, how comfortable are you with being the face of menopause? Do you identify yourself as
something that? I just get these things.
If it's not fit chick, now you're the face of menopause, right?
Could be worse. You could be the fat cyclist.
It's funny because before I was going to launch the show, I think it was my producer sent me a Slack. She's like, are you ready? Or, are you prepared to be the face of menopause? And I'm like, I never even thought of it that way. That's just not how I was thinking about it. And I still don't think about it that way. But for a lot of these women, and it was, that show was the 100th episode, where one of the very enthusiastic listeners and people in the community interviewed me, about how I got in it and like my background. And, for them, I very much am that, right? And I take that very seriously, and it's meaningful to me because I get DMs and messages. I got 2 today from women who are like, and it's hard for me to even say it because it sounds like I'm being hyperbolic, but they say to me like, you have like saved my life, or you have given me my life back, because they put down the thing that they love doing because it wasn't giving them joy anymore, because their training wasn't working and they weren't responding and they felt lost and they felt alone. And it is unbelievably satisfying to get this kind of feedback from people and to have this community of women who are just like paying it forward by the legion because just nobody was talking, and all it took was somebody to like sit at a microphone and help,
Yep. So, as we said, this show tends to lean. This show tends to lean male. I would say it's about 90% male, which is fine. So, give us something for the men here in menopause. Not that we're in menopause, but the women in our lives who are in menopause. Give us a primer, if you will, something that we can take home, a little bit of knowledge about menopause and its stages. What should we know about this section of a woman's life?
Let me put it in terms that when I talk to men, because I 100% get like it could be really hard to like understand like what is happening. So for women, you're sort of your premenopausal when you are post-puberty and you have a regular menstrual cycle, and that's your premenopausal part. And then somewhere it can happen as early as the late 30s, but most women it's in their 40s sometime. They hit a patch called perimenopause. And that's when basically you're not ovulating as regularly anymore. Your reproductive system is winding down. Ovaries are winding down. So you're not ovulating as regularly anymore, but your hormones are responding. There's this nice chorus that happens, and now it's just like screaming cats, right? Like some of the hormones are shooting up, some of them are going down, and your hormones affect everything. They affect your brain. They affect, your thermal regulation. That's why you have hot flashes and people get anxiety and they can't, those hormones, when they're swinging like that, it really, really impacts you. And then as your reproductive system winds down, those hormones taper off and you do settle down, but you're in another state because you don't have those same hormones you did at the same rate. And like estrogen's anabolic, so women lose muscle and, the body composition changes. But like if a man wanted to understand what this was like, you could just think like, what would it be like if you had like 7 years where your testosterone would either go sky high and you were raging, or it would go super low and you didn't know like who you were or what you were. And then then your testosterone just disappeared one day and you stopped making it. Like that's imagine how you would feel. Like that's
terrible.
That is right. Like this is what is happening when you look at graphs of women's, like men, clearly they have a hormonal journey too, right? But it's much more of an off ramp. It's gradual. Where women, like you can look at those graphs and you can just literally see them fall off a cliff. Like the hormones just go. And so if your significant other like is suddenly just really not is struggling with a lot of these things, it's being driven by this process. And there's help. Like hormone therapy for people who are suffering a lot is a really great tool. There's lots of things that you can do to help this smooth out this journey. But like just being there and like understanding like, oh, this is hormonally driven, it goes a long way. And just understanding that she's going through some stuff. Like this is a big transition.
Yeah, well, it's a great thing about your book, your books, plural, and your podcast is that, look, you can't really change it. It's going to happen in a woman's life, but empowering them with the knowledge of what's happening lets them understand, and maybe their partners as well. Oh, now I get it. Okay, and this is what I can do to help at least offset it or mitigate it a little bit. Now, is there something on the other side for someone going through this change in their life? Is there a spot where things calm down a little bit and they can feel not normal but close to normal?
I'm there now. Like I think the worst part for a lot of women is when the hormones are like really swinging and they're not settled. But you do sort of come into a quote unquote new normal, but I feel like way more like myself. And I've never, I mean, just to be transparent, I've not used hormone therapy. I've used other adaptogens. You know, there's some things that you can use to sort of help with the stress, and like anxiety was a big one for me. But I feel much more like myself than I have in a while now that things are calmed down.
Nice. Okay, good. Look, we like to wrap up here with something with our guests. It's kind of been fun over the last year or so. We've been doing these interviews, and that's something we call your call-up song. In baseball, I'm a big baseball fan, Selene. Baseball players get what they call a walk-up song.
Oh, I know what they are.
Comes right to the plate. They're playing a song of his choice.
Yep.
I thought this would be a great idea for cycling, especially at races, where the athletes, as they're announced, they get a call-up song. So why don't you let us know, if you were lining up for a race right now and you could pick a call-up song for Selene Yeager, what would your call-up song be?
I don't even have to think. It would be Happy by Pharrell Williams.
Oh.
Because I am.
Okay.
I am relentlessly positive, and it would definitely be Happy.
I like that.
Love it. Does that song ever get stuck in your head when you're writing, though?
Yeah, I can't get enough of it.
You're okay with it. You're okay with the auto repeat of a single song. Okay, fantastic.
Well, Selene Yeager, we've covered a lot of topics here today. You're a great resource. We encourage everyone to go check out Feisty Media, Hit Play Not Pause, the books, Roar Next Level, Rush to Glory, Climb.
Gravel. I have one in Gravel.
Gravel was another one. Yeah, it would be a good one, too, for this audience in particular. And keep looking for you in Bicycling Magazine. We can keep seeing you there, correct? So
yeah, just wrote about tire pressure, talking about marginal gains.
Oh, awesome.
Whole feature on it.
Again, thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate you being here, and we look forward to your next endeavor, your next article, your next book, what have you.
Good luck in that try.
Thank you.